Hello, everybody. Hi, and welcome to another joint women's wellness and men's wellness. If you don't know me, my name's Liz Hosford. I'm the chair of the women's wellness, and I have my very capable and lovely colleague, Damon Johnston, with me, who just before I go into what tonight's about, I'm going to just pass you over to him, and he may have a few words for all you lovely males out there. Damon, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm Damon, part of the men's wellbeing group. I'll be celebrating 30 years post-transplant tomorrow. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I've just watched the first one, and it was really exciting. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And yeah, I'll just pass you back over to Liz.
Smashing. Thanks, Damon. Always good to see you. Well, it's lovely to see so many people have joined up. I'm just scrolling through. I'm not going to go all through the names, but a big hello to one and all. And thank you very much for giving up your time wherever you are in the world for joining us. So you may have been watching part one. It is available on the WTGF website. But if you haven't, welcome. This is part two of building mental and physical strength after transplant. A really, really important subject. And those of us who've had a transplant could talk about it. But luckily, we have three fantastic experts here. We have Lane, Urja, and Divya, who are part of the transplant research team. And they are more than educated to tell us all about it. So, ladies, thank you very much for giving us your time and putting this fantastic presentation into place. I shall, without further ado, hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, good evening. It's Elaine Duncan here talking from Glasgow, and I'm just here to help link you all to our presenters, Divya and Urja, and they are going to walk us through some reflection moments as well as some, thinking time and information as to why it can be quite complex to return to any type of movement, exercise and sport. So I will now let Urja and Divya take the floor, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Elaine, for that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Urja Mehta. Thank you for joining us again for part two. And if you missed part one, then welcome to the presentation on resilience in the transplant journey, with a special focus on rebuilding confidence to return to physical activity and sport. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, this is just a bit of recap of what we spoke about in the first webinar. If you could go to the next slide, please. So in part one, we talked about how life after transplant is not just physical recovery, it's emotional and psychological as well. We discussed how adjustment isn't linear, but how good and difficult days can coexist, and how uncertainty is a human response and not a weakness. We also explored practical ways to cope, such as grounding the body with breathing techniques, working with thoughts, and giving ourselves the permission to feel mixed emotions. So today we're going to build on that foundation. But before we begin, we would just like to ask those who are rejoining, what stuck with you from the last webinar? And did anyone try any of the coping strategies, maybe the breathing work or the journaling, anything that, anybody tried and it worked well? We'd just like to maybe hear from you guys. You could just put in the chat box or maybe unmute if you feel comfortable to do that, yeah.
Everyone's welcome to just put something in the chat if you don't want to disrupt the meeting, and I shall do my best to keep an eye on all the messages that are coming through and make sure that they're answered or noted at the end of the presentation. Sure, I think you can carry on. I'll keep an eye on the chat. If anything comes
Okay.
through, I'll let you
Okay.
know.
So the next slide, please. So for those of you who did not attend the last webinar, just a bit of an introduction to who we are. So my colleague Divya and I have attended the transplant games that happened in Oxford last year, and we were accompanied by our supervisor, Dr. Elaine Duncan, who has been involved with the transplant games for many years, and she's also present here today. And Divya and I have both supported transplant recipients before and after sporting events, and Divya's expertise also lies specifically in transplant related research. Next. So finally, before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for removing time from your schedules to attend this webinar this evening. This is a safe space, and I'd like everyone to take a moment to ground themselves before we begin. Participation is optional, so whether it's mentioning things in the chat box or reflecting on things personally, everyone's transplant journey is different, and we would like to be mindful of that. Next. So I'm sure that this thought has probably crossed your mind at least once, that why does returning to activity or sport feel so complex and hard post-transplant? So when we talk about returning to activity after a transplant, it's important to recognize that it's rarely just a physical decision. It's a psychological and a mental one as well. So medically, you might be told that your body is ready. Your tests may look stable, your doctors are happy with your progress, but psychological readiness doesn't always move at the same pace as your physical recovery. So you might feel unsure, vulnerable, or hesitant, and that doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that your mind is still catching up with what your body has been through. So there can always be a very real fear of harming the transplant or the graft. And even if the risk is low, the thought of what if I overdo it, or what if something goes wrong, can feel very overwhelming. And after everything you've been through, it makes sense that your instinct is to protect what you've been given. And many people also describe becoming hyper aware of their bodily sensations. So every ache, every flutter, every moment of fatigue can feel extremely amplified. So you might find yourself scanning your body and wondering, is this normal? And that heightened vigilance is often a response to past medical trauma and your body's way of just trying to keep you safe. And then there's also the pressure that's there, sometimes from others, sometimes from yourself, where, to get back to normal, but normal may look different now. And recovery isn't about going back to who you were before. It's about building a new sense of confidence and safety in your body at your own pace. So if returning to activity feels more complicated than expected, that's not failure. It's just part of the adjustment process. Next. So we've learned a lot about this, and I think just to explain to you in an easy way, to learn the psychology behind this and understand that when we think about returning to sport or activity after transplant, we often assume that once the body is ready, that the confidence should automatically just be there. But psychologically, confidence is slowly rebuilt. It doesn't just switch back on. Research in rehabilitation and injury psychology show that confidence is shaped by experience and not just information. So even if you may have gotten the medical clearance that you've cleared, your brain is still asking you that, do I feel safe? And confidence grows through small successful experiences. So each session, each movement, each positive outcome begins to rebuild trust in the body. So it's also important to reframe this fear and try to look at fear not as a weakness, but from a psychological perspective, looking at fear as a protective response. So after a major medical event, your nervous system is on high alert. And that heightened awareness is your brain trying to prevent harm. And the goal is not to eliminate fear completely, but to learn how to move forward alongside it. So what can sometimes happen is avoidance. So that's very natural that you want to avoid the fear. But if an activity feels scary, maybe running at full pace, lifting heavier weights, or returning to competitive sport, the natural response may be to avoid it completely. And in the short term, yes, avoidance does reduce anxiety, but long-term research on exposure and behavioral psychology shows that avoidance can actually maintain this fear and reduce your confidence. So if we never test the body gently, we never gather evidence that we can cope. And this is why graded exposure becomes very powerful. So instead of jumping straight back into previous levels of performance, we need to break it down. So, for example, you start with light training before full sessions, practicing specific movements in controlled environments, returning to non-contact drills before competitive play, and setting time-based rather than performance-based goals. And we'll talk a little bit about this later. But each small success sends a message to the brain that this is safe, and over time, that repeated evidence builds trust. So psychologically, return to sport isn't about being fearless, but it's about rebuilding that confidence step by step and respecting fear as protective and gradually expanding what feels possible. Next. So one of the biggest psychological shifts after transplant is learning to trust your body again. So for many people, the body that once felt unpredictable, it may have been associated with illness, with hospital admissions, symptoms that escalated quickly, or a sense of betrayal. So even when recovery is going well, there can still be the lingering question of, can I really trust my body now? So research on illness perceptions shows that how we interpret our bodily symptoms strongly influence our emotional response and our behavior. So after major medical events, people often develop a heightened threat awareness. So the body becomes something to monitor closely. And while listening to the body is important, there's a difference between a healthy awareness and hypervigilance. So healthy awareness sounds like, I notice I'm tired today, maybe I just need some rest. While hypervigilance sounds like, why am I tired? Is something wrong? Is this rejection from my body? So when the body has once felt unpredictable, it makes sense that the mind tries to scan for danger, but constant scanning can increase anxiety and reduce confidence. So part of recovery involves relearning what sensations mean. So for example, muscle soreness after an activity may simply be deconditioning, not damage. Your increased heart rate during your exercise may be just the normal physiological response of the body, not danger. And fatigue may just reflect effort and not failure. So this is where distinguishing discomfort from danger becomes crucial. So discomfort might feel unpleasant, but manageable and temporary, while danger is usually more persistent, it escalates, or when your medically concerning symptoms arise. So learning this distinguish often involves working closely with medical teams to understand what is expected and what requires attention. So gradually, this process helps rebuild what we might call a cooperative relationship with the body, where you move from my body is something I must control or fear to my body and I are working together. So trust isn't rebuilt through reassurance alone. It's rebuilt through having these consistent experiences of moving, resting, responding, and noticing that the body can cope. So trusting the body post-transplant isn't about ignoring the symptoms, but it's about developing an informed awareness, about listening carefully to your body and not living in a constant state of alarm. Next. So one of the most important psychological distinctions in recovery is understanding this difference between fear and when an actual risk is there. So fear does not always equal danger. So from a psychological perspective, fear is an alarm system and it's evolved to protect us. But after a major medical experience like a transplant, the alarm system can become very sensitive and it may go off when the current situation is medically safe. So you might feel fear when increasing activity, when returning to sport, trying something new, or when you notice certain abnormal bodily sensations. But that feeling alone doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. So this is where medical guidance becomes very important. So your GP or your specific medical staff regarding your specific surgery provides you with certain safety boundaries. So they give you certain clear parameters around what is safe, what you need to monitor, and what requires attention. So those boundaries act as an external framework for decision making. So instead of relying purely on how anxious you feel, you can anchor yourself with this medical advice. So for example, if your team says that moderate exercise is safe, fear during that exercise then doesn't mean that you're harming yourself. And if your blood work is good and stable, anxiety about rejection doesn't automatically mean that rejection is occurring. So research in cognitive behavioral psychology also shows that anxiety can amplify normal sensations. So a small flutter can feel like a crisis and mild fatigue can feel catastrophic. So when we are anxious, our attention narrows and our interpretation becomes very threat focused. So part of the adjustment involves learning to tolerate this discomfort. So safe discomfort might look like feeling breathless during exercise, experiencing muscle soreness after increasing activity, and not knowing 100% how something will go. So avoiding all discomfort may temporarily reduce anxiety, but it can shrink your confidence over time. So gradual exposure to safe experiences with medical guidance helps recalibrate the alarm system of your body. And the goal again isn't to remove fear entirely. The goal is to respond to fear with information, boundaries, and evidence rather than automatically treating it as a danger. So over time, the nervous system learns that I can feel the fear but still be safe. So this slide looks at graded return to physical activity. So when we think about returning to physical activity or sport after transplant, one of the most helpful principles is this, that start smaller than you think you need to. So often motivation pushes us to prove something, whether that's to ourselves, to others. But psychologically and physiologically, starting slightly below what you believe you can do creates early success. And early success builds confidence. So overloading yourself with too much in the beginning builds doubt. And research on graded exposure and rehabilitation shows that gradual progression reduces fear, improves adherence, and strengthens self-confidence, which is your belief in that I can do this. And another helpful strategy is to track not just effort, but your emotional responses as well. So whenever I have worked with athletes coming back from a transplant surgery and returning to physical activity or their sport, I always ask them to keep a training diary or a log. So instead of only asking how far did I walk or how was my practice session today or how much did I lift, also ask yourself, how did I feel before? How anxious was I during? And how confident do I feel now after it? So this gives you a fuller picture of the fact that sometimes physically the session was manageable, but emotionally it may have felt overwhelming, and that's important data. So other times anxiety is high at the start and it may have reduced at the end, which is powerful evidence that your nervous system does settle over time. I think it's also important to celebrate your consistency over intensity. So building a routine and doing something small 3 times a week builds more trust than pushing hard once and needing days to recover physically or emotionally. So consistency sends a message of safety and reliability to the brain, and then you can increase this routine gradually. And that might mean adding 5 more minutes to a walk, increasing your weight slightly, progressing from a solo practice session to group sessions, and moving from non-competitive settings to competitive settings. And small increments allow your brain and body to adapt together. And the aim isn't to rapidly progress towards your goal, but it's sustainable confidence, and a graded return respects both the transplant and the nervous system, building strength and trust at the same time. So next, when we look at setting these flexible goals. So when returning to activity or sport after transplant, the way you set your goals is incredibly important. So there's a strong psychological difference between process goals and outcome goals. And now what that means is outcome goals focuses on the end result. For example, I want to run 5K in 25 minutes, or I want to compete at the same level as before, or I want to lose 3 kgs in a month. So all of these are your end goal. What we want to focus on is the process goals and focus on the behavior of getting there, or what's in your control to achieve that goal. So for example, I'll show up to training twice this week, or I'll follow my recovery plan, or I'll listen to my body and adjust when needed. So research in goal setting theory shows that process goals build consistency and your confidence. They reduce pressure and they increase sustainable motivation. And when we anchor our goals in behaviors rather than results, we create more opportunities to succeed. And another key piece is adjusting your expectations. So pre-transplant, your body functioned in a very different context. So your capacity, your recovery, and even identity may have shifted. Holding yourself to old standards can create frustration, shame, or self-criticism. And this links to avoiding comparison with your pre-transplant self. So it's natural to think that, I used to be able to do so and so, but that comparison often ignores everything that your body has survived. So instead of measuring progress against who you were before, it can be more helpful to measure against where you were last month or last week. And most importantly, progress is not linear. So there'll be strong days, there'll be slow days, there may be setbacks, fatigue, medical appointments, dips in motivation. Psychological adjustment research does show that recovery follows a fluctuating path and it's not a straight upward line. And a flexible mindset looks like, today is slower and that's part of the process. I'm going to adapt rather than quit. And flexible goals don't mean lowering standards. They mean responding intelligently to change. And in transplant recovery, flexibility isn't weakness, it's resilience. Next, so when returning to activity post-transplant, you want to be able to monitor more than just your physical fatigue. And physical fatigue includes your heart rate, your muscle soreness, your breathlessness, but recovery is more than just your physical recovery. And we need to monitor the emotional side as well. So having emotional check-ins with yourself can be extremely powerful. Asking yourself, how am I feeling about training today? Am I excited? Am I anxious, neutral, or resistant? Even measuring it on a scale of 1 to 10 helps give yourself perspective on the intensity of that emotion. So sometimes your body may feel okay, but emotionally there's a lot of heaviness, fear, or pressure. That emotional data matters just as much as your physical data. It's also helpful to notice motivation shifts. So motivation fluctuates as well, and research in self-determination theory shows that your motivation is strongest when you feel independent, competent, and supported. And if motivation drops suddenly, it may not mean you're lazy or failing. It may signal fatigue, overwhelm, fear, or setting yourself up with unrealistic expectations. And confidence levels are another important marker. So after a session, instead of only asking, was I able to complete it, you may even want to ask yourself, do I feel more confident than before I started? Or do I trust my body a little more today? And confidence often grows gradually, and tracking it helps you see that progress. So even when performance may not have dramatically changed, it's important to keep the track of that, even that slow progress of your confidence. And finally, recovery quality. So recovery is extremely important, and this includes your sleep, your nutrition, your mood, your stress levels, and how settled your nervous system feels. So you might complete a session physically, but if your anxiety remains high for hours afterwards, that's important feedback that your body is giving you. So it may mean the step was slightly too big. It wasn't wrong, but it was just too quick for your body to adapt to. So monitoring more than physical fatigue allows you to respond intelligently rather than to react just emotionally. And it helps you adjust before burnout, before discouragement, and before fear takes over. So recovery isn't just about what the body can tolerate, it's about what the whole system can sustain. And next, I'll hand it over to Divya for the next half of the presentation.
Thank you, Urja. So, one of the most protective factors in returning to activity after transplant isn't just physical capacity, it's communication and support. Talking openly with healthcare providers is essential. Sometimes fear grows in the absence of clarity. When you're unsure about what's safe, your mind may fill in the gaps with worst case scenarios. Asking direct questions like, what intensity is safe for me right now? What symptoms would require concern? What is normal during progression can significantly reduce the uncertainty, and clear medical guidance creates psychological safety. It helps shift decision making from fear based to information based thinking. It's also important to ask clear questions about limits. Instead of asking, can I exercise, which is very broad, try asking, can I lift weights at moderate intensity? Can I train 3 times a week? Can I participate in non contact drills? Specific questions lead to specific boundaries, and boundaries reduce anxiety. So, if you're working with trainers or coaches, ideally they understand transplant or are willing to learn about it. A trainer who appreciates medical nuances, fatigue variability, and psychological adjustment will pace progression appropriately. And the goal is collaboration, not pressure. And finally, peer support can be incredibly powerful. Connecting with other transplant athletes and recipients, such as the World Transplant Federation, where through local groups, transplant games, or online communities provides live reassurance. Seeing someone else who has walked this path, who has navigated fear and rebuilt confidence, makes recovery feel possible. And research on social support consistently shows that feeling understood reduces stress and improves adherence. And sometimes just hearing, I felt that too, can reduce isolation dramatically. Recovery after transplant isn't meant to be done alone. Communication builds clarity, support builds confidence, and together they create a safer pathway back to activity. Next. Fear often appears when people first start returning to physical activity after transplant, and that reaction is very normal. When fear shows up, the first step is not to fight it or judge it. The first step is to pause and take a breath. Slowly, the breath helps calm the nervous system and creates a little space between the feeling of fear and the action you take next. From there, it can help to ask yourself, what do I actually know right now? For example, you might remind yourself, my doctor has cleared me to exercise. I have managed similar activity before. I'm paying attention to my body and I can stop or adjust if needed. Those kinds of statements bring us back to facts rather than fears. If the activity still feels overwhelming, it is completely okay to adjust the intensity. You might slow the pace, reduce the duration, lower the resistance, or take a short break. That is not giving up, that is responding wisely. Then, when you feel ready, you resume with intention. The goal is not to prove anything and it is not to be fearless. The goal is gradually rebuild trust in your body through safe, repeated experiences. And over time, those small moments of staying calm, adjusting when needed, and continuing safely can become very powerful. At this point, it can be helpful to pause and reflect on current relationship with activity. Recovery is not only physical, it is also emotional and psychological. How we feel about movement matters just as much as what we are physically able to do. So, ask yourself a few simple questions. You can do this activity while I'm going through it or and reflect it down or maybe take screenshot of the questions mentioned here. Like first, what activity feels safest right now? For many people, this may be something gentle and familiar like walking, stretching, light cycling, or basic mobility work. Safe activities often feel predictable, manageable, and less emotionally loaded. And then second question can be what activity feels the most intimidating? For some people, this could be running, strength training, returning to a gym, or going back to a sport they used to love. Sometimes the intimidation is about the intensity itself. Other times, it is about what the activity represents. Perhaps the fear of not being as strong as before, or worrying that the body cannot cope. And the last question you can ask is, what would a gentle first step look like? That question is really important because recovery usually works best when we reduce the size of the challenge. Instead of jumping straight into the hardest version of the activity, we focus on one small manageable step. For example, if running feels intimidating, the first step might simply be a 10-minute walk. If the gym feels overwhelming, the first step might be walking into space and doing one or two familiar exercises. And if strength training feels too big, the first step might be bodyweight movement at home. And these early steps matter. They rebuild connection, they rebuild confidence, reduce the psychological barrier to the movement, and create a sense of success that you can build on over time. Next. Before returning to an activity, one useful psychological technique is visualization, and you might have heard about it. So, it is a simple form of mental rehearsal. It involves imagining yourself doing the activity in a calm, controlled, and successful way before you actually begin. And this can help reduce anxiety, improve confidence, and prepare both the mind and body for the movement. And you can guide yourself through these three simple stages. First, picture yourself starting small. Like imagine beginning the activity at an easy, comfortable pace. See yourself approaching it calmly rather than rushing in. And you are not trying to push hard, you are simply beginning in a way that feels safe and manageable. Second, notice your body sensations. Imagine yourself breathing steadily. Picture your muscles working smoothly. Notice your posture, your rhythm, and your sense of control. The aim here is to connect movement with steadiness rather than danger. And finally, imagine finishing the activity feeling steady, calm, and proud of yourself. Not exhausted, not overwhelmed, but grounded. And imagine completing the session and being able to say, I did that safely, I listened to my body, I handled that well. This kind of mental rehearsal can be helpful, especially when anxiety shows up before movement. It gives the brain a chance to practice success before the body physically begins. And importantly, it does not need to take long. Even 30 seconds to 1 minute of guided visualization before activity can make a meaningful difference. Next. One helpful way to think about recovery is a ladder rather than a leap. A leap suggests that we should suddenly return to where we were before, but in reality, most recovery happens step by step. A ladder reminds us that progress is gradual, structured, and built over time. Step one is light, low pressure movement. This could include walking, gentle stretching, mobility work, or short sessions of easy activity. And at this stage, the focus is often on consistency, comfort, and reconnecting with movement in a positive way. Step 2 introduces moderate intensity. This is where the body begins adapting again. Sessions may become little longer or slightly more challenging, but still within a manageable range. The aim is not maximum performance, it is rebuilding your capacity. Step 3 is structured training. At this point, activity becomes more regular and more intentional. There may be a routine, a program, or specific goals. Confidence often begins to grow here because the person is no longer just testing movement, they are beginning to trust their body with a pattern of training. And finally, step 4 involves higher demand or competitive activity for those who want to return to sport or more intense exercise. That might include vigorous training, performance based goals, or participation in sport again. But it is really important to say that not everyone needs to reach the top of the ladder, and that is completely okay. For some people, success means returning to competitive sport. For others, success means being able to walk regularly, stay active, and feel well in daily life. The goal is not to force everyone toward the same destination. The goal is to find a level of activity that supports health, well being, confidence, and quality of life. Next. One of the most important psychological skills during recovery is self compassion. Many transplant recipients feel pressure to recover quickly. They may compare themselves to how they used to perform or to how they think they should be progressing. Sometimes they compare themselves to others as well. But recovery is not a race and it is not a test of worth. It is important to remember you are not behind. Recovery timelines vary widely, and each person's journey is shaped by many factors: physical health, medical complications, confidence, energy levels, support systems, and life circumstances. There is no single correct pace. Your timeline is valid, and progress is not always linear. There may be good weeks and harder weeks. There may be moments of confidence and moments of doubt. That does not mean you are failing, it means you are recovering in a real and human way. Self compassion means speaking to yourself in a way that is supportive rather than critical. It means recognizing effort, respecting limits, and understanding that rest and pacing are not weaknesses. In fact, true strength often includes pacing yourself, listening to your body, and allowing space for recovery. In the long term, sustainability matters far more than speed. A slower, kinder return that you can maintain is often much more valuable than pushing too hard and becoming discouraged or overwhelmed. So, throughout recovery, it can help to ask, what would a compassionate response from myself look like right now? And it can help you in a longer run. Next. When returning to activity, it can be very helpful to distinguish between normal psychological adjustment and signs that additional support may be needed. Some level of discomfort, uncertainty, or worry is often a normal part of the process. For example, people may notice mild anxiety before exercise, fluctuations in confidence, or occasional overthinking about physical symptoms. And these reactions are common when rebuilding trust in the body. They do not automatically mean that something is wrong. In many cases, they lessen over time as the person has more positive and safe experiences with movement. However, there are times when extra support is important. For example, if someone begins avoiding all physical activity because of fear, experiences panic during movement, becomes highly preoccupied with bodily sensations, or notices a persistent low mood that is affecting daily life, those may be signs that more help is needed. Other signs might include strong distress before every session, a sense of helplessness about the body, or feeling completely stuck despite wanting to move forward. And in those situations, support from healthcare professionals, rehabilitation teams, or psychological services can make a meaningful difference. Reaching out for support is not a sign of weakness, it is a proactive step that can help people feel safer, more supported, and more confident as they return to activity. Next. To summarize a few key points from this section, first, fear is protective. It is not a sign of failure. It simply means your brain is trying to keep you safe, especially after a major medical experience. Second, confidence grows through gradual exposure. Confidence usually does not appear first and then lead to action. More often, confidence is built through action, through small repeated experience of safe movement. Third, body trust is rebuilt through repetition. The more positive movement experiences you have, the more your nervous system learns that activity can be safe, manageable, and meaningful again. And finally, it is possible to be both cautious and capable at the same time. Being cautious does not mean you are weak, it means you are paying attention. And being capable does not mean ignoring fear, it means learning how to move forward with it in a safe and measured way. So, overall, recovery is not about eliminating all fear, it is about learning how to respond to fear in a way that supports your progress. Next. As we come toward the end of this section, I would like to leave you with a brief reflection. Take a moment to think about one thing you might try this week that moves you gently toward more activity. It does not need to be dramatic. It might be a shorter walk, a few minutes of stretching, practicing a breathing exercise before movement, or returning to an activity at a lower intensity than before. What matters most is that it feels realistic and achievable. Next, consider one belief you might want to challenge. Perhaps it is a thought like, my body is not strong enough, or I have to push myself harder to make progress, or even if I feel nervous, I should not do it. Sometimes recovery involves questioning the beliefs that have quietly shaped our behavior, and finally recognize one strength you already have that has helped you get this far in your transplant journey. That strength might be patience, courage, persistence, adaptability, discipline, or the ability to ask for help when needed. It is easy to focus on what feels uncertain, but it is just as important to recognize the strengths you already carry with you. And I'll give you 5 minutes if you just want to add your reflections or insights in the chat box, or if you want to switch on your mic and share it with others.
Thank you very much, ladies. Goodness me, that was amazing. Is amazing. We are unbelievably lucky to have you all here, and Elaine as well, to give such a thorough and deep insight into this very important part of after having a transplant. Thank you very much. Whilst people perhaps are putting some chats down or want to put their hands up or something, if they want to say something, please, please go ahead. I just want to just add a couple of bits. Thank you very much indeed. I think what was very obvious is that every journey is so different. Whether you're at the beginning of your transplant journey, you've just had your transplant, you're waiting for your transplant and thinking about what you might do, whether you've had your transplant for many years. I think the presentation went across all those boards, and I'm certainly going to take some information away from it here. So thank you. Easy sometimes to forget that something like a walk, even for 5 minutes, can really boost your mood. And I think it's what I saw from the presentation is that one presumes sometimes that sport, transplant sport, whether it be on a world level or at a national level, one seems to think that you have to compete to that really, really, really high level. Well, for some people that's okay, but it's doing the small steps, and I can't say how grateful I am for you ladies to come along and put that across there. It's absolutely fantastic. Right, I'm trying to look and read at the same time. I think there's a lot of reassurance in the presentation that you gave as well. Not everyone, as I said, not everyone's walked the same path, and there were a lot of options for different people there. I would urge anyone with any questions now or even later to get in contact with this fab team. I wish that it had been around when I first had my transplant, but it's here now, and I certainly will be using the facility, definitely. I'm just going to have a look at the chat while I'm just going on here. Wow, Jim, fantastic. This year's 44 years for my transplant. Well, that's quite amazing, Jim. Thank you so much for being here. That gives a lot of hope to all of us, and I trust you are well. And thank you very much. Be very interested to see what sort of activity you're involved in, Jim, and how over the years you found that journey. Okay, there someone's put in, Claire has put in, I wanted to find out more about the games. Claire, oh lovely, WTGF are already on it. This is fantastic. This is why they're here. They've answered the question already. Just follow that. That's great. I'm not quite sure what country you're in or everything, but as I said, do WTGF@WTGF.org and they'll be able to assist you. Right, go back to my little notes here. I really like the thing about starting a small goal. One can be active in a sport that you're used to, but starting a new sport or a new activity can seem a little overwhelming sometimes. Speaking from experience, it's still, those little things in your head which say, I can't do that, or, this isn't the right day, or I'm going to ignore that. And then I really like the thing of, when you're not doing any physical exercise, how that can build up. And that was really interesting. You can go through a bad time in your personal life, or something happens, and then think, I'll leave it today. And then suddenly that builds up, and starting again after that it is so tricky. So those small goals that you set, ladies, were, you know, fantastic, you know, really helpful information. Thank you. I think the whole whilst I'm just looking through the messages, the whole idea about the wellness programs, whether it be the women's wellness or the men's wellness, is to support not only the physical being after a transplant, but the mental well-being as well, which is hugely important. There are counsellors out there, and one may get counselling pre and post transplant, one may not, but coming together in a situation like this, where we've got everyone together and everyone sharing their stories, and then having expert advice, I don't think we can say how important that is. So I would urge any of you who have any ideas also about any further topics that you'd like to explore, please get in touch with WTGF, and then we can look at putting those forward. But this will not be the last time that I'm going to ask these ladies to come and show their expertise. And I know they've got some info for us at the end as well. I'm also going to say, whilst I'm doing this sort of thanks, a big thank you to National Lottery as well, because without that funding, these webinars couldn't go ahead, and a lot of outside activities as well. So this is growing the whole time. So your support also as participants is really appreciated. So thank you all for giving your time. Really, that's really great. Right, glass is back on. Let's have a look what's going on down here. Okay, fantastic. Well, as I said, you can put some chat questions on if you want to, but I know we have a little poll going as well. So if everyone doesn't mind, I think, oh, look at that. They're on it this evening. Do you know, it's almost like it's telepathic. It's straight there. So here we go. Join in with the poll if you so wish. And if you've got any chats as well or any questions, just put those in. I'll keep an eye. So how long has it been since your transplant? There's a little bit missing there. So this would be lovely. I always remember, I've been going to the games for quite a few times. And I always remember to games, there was a wonderful doctor called Dr. Christine Evans, who, when she was chair of transplant sport in Great Britain, used to make everybody stand up, saying, and then if you've had your transplant more than 6 months, if 6 months or less, sit down, a year, 2, 3, 5. And it was just wonderful to see these years go up. And, you know, sort of 35, 44. Jim, I don't know if you were in one of those games, who knows? But there we are. So look, there's the first question. How long have you had your transplant? Drop it in there. I'm always interested. I think it's great. You know, great to see. You know, you may be just a year. You might be what's the best word? As mature in years with Jim, although I'm sure Jim is only a youngster. However, you know, it's really lovely to see. I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah. Oh, wow. Looks like we got both ends of the scale. So Jim's 44 years post-transplant and Paula, 12 weeks post-transplant. Fantastic. Thank you. So this makes me so happy. Thank you so much. Please put the poll up now, definitely. Okay. There we go. Number 2, how confident do you currently feel about being physically active after your transplant? Okay, so I'm going to stick mine in there. There we go. Fantastic. Let me put those in there. I am just shouting out some thing to WTGF. I'm sure we'll be able to see a response of who has put what, not personally who has put what, but the general sort of outcome and ideas of who has put what. Whilst we're just waiting for the next one, Elaine, I wonder if you could just pop your microphone on. Thank you. Lovely to see you, Dr. Elaine Duncan again. Now, I've known Dr. Elaine for a long time. I'm sure she won't mind me saying that her lovely husband, David Sykes, has had a transplant for 30, I'm going to say 32 years.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, that's right. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And whilst everyone's looking at the next question there, Elaine, what inspired you to get involved in the first place with the psychology of sport, everything, and then later on with the Transplant Games?
Oh, I think it goes a long, long, long time back. I was encouraged when young to be active. I was quite energetic, and I was helpfully directed towards things to be involved in. So I kind of had a good relationship with moving from a very young age. And I was competitive myself, and training. So I kind of understand, the effort that requires. So that led me gradually towards training to be helpful in the realm of moving, understanding moving, returning to moving, and also going through to what's needed for sporting excellence. So the whole experience. But then, of course, meeting David in 2009 opened a whole world to me that I'd never experienced before. And I saw, I guess, a need for a psychologically informed support mechanism for how to return to movement. Because as Urja and Divya said, it's not just a physical entity. It is very, very much all wrapped up in who you thought you were, who you are now, thoughts and feelings. And it's so complex. It's a wonder we ever actually achieve it sometimes, because there are so many barriers. But I think they did a wonderful job emphasising certain things like you are not behind. The self-compassion is evidence-based, it's worthy. Practical steps offered here tonight. That recovery is part of the process. It's not just the effort to be active, recovery is in it. And cautious and capable. What a lovely message.
Yeah, very
I think,
really
yeah.
positive.
And, I hope people are thinking about the one thing they might want to try next week, the one belief they may want to play with, and the strengths. So I think hopefully that answered your question as well as brought in tonight's theme.
It did. Thank you so much. That's lovely. And I think it's okay to try different things as well. You might be somebody who really wants to go back to running, but you might be somebody who wants to try yoga, or you want to play snooker, or you want to go and play badminton, so I think the overall thing here is that don't worry about your that when I think it was Divya who showed the ladder. Don't worry about sort of making that leap to there. Take that small step, and then that small step may lead you to concentrate on that sport for a while. But then it's okay to try something else, and it's just being positive about it. But it's so helpful to have those steps and that advice, because it is tricky sometimes to remain positive the whole time, especially if something hurts or it doesn't feel right or something like that is tricky. So I'm just going to answer my next question here. It's gone. I nearly did it. Oh, here we go. Oh, I forgot to do that one. So that was after today's session, how you're feeling about activity. Well, tell you what, although I didn't answer, I'm going to give my personal view here. I am quite active. I love my sport. I've been doing transplant sport for many, many years. And I've changed my sporting ideas recently. I fancied doing something new. My children went to uni. So I decided to get a coach and have a go a bit more at javelin. So I really enjoy it. And then I found that, unfortunately, you have to learn how to throw properly. And I thought I was just throwing okay, but turning up at the games and just chucking something perhaps wasn't what I thought it was all about. So he's got me into weightlifting, and all those little small things that the girls are talking about really, really click in. You look at a lot of people in the gym, and they're lifting this and lifting that and doing that, but I only work within my capabilities, and those small steps, from lifting whatever kilos to the next one is the big goal for me. With the javelin, I'm never going to throw 70 meters as much as I think I can. But it's about going, well, okay, I'm going to gain 10 centimeters next time. And it's about doing the things that, do make you happy and fulfilled. And it's great. How much do you currently trust your body? Okay, I'm going to go for that one. That would do. Okay. I'm not quite sure how many more questions we've got up, but thank you very much, WTGF, for putting those questions together, because it's all really good. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, mostly trusted. Yeah. I wonder if you've put mostly trusted, what stops you trusting it completely? I wonder if there's something from the slides that you can perhaps pinpoint on, and just as the lady said, can you make that change for this week? See what there is. Okay, so what do you notice new body sensation during activity? When you notice a new body sensation during activity, what is your first thought? Okay, I'm going to go for that one there. Lovely. And Paula, I see you've just put a kidney live donor from your brother. Still getting my head around it all. Yeah. Do you know what? Good for you saying that, because you're absolutely right. It's a big thing, So I don't know if this is your first time joining one of the wellness ones, but please, do get in contact. And also, if you're looking for some support networks around you, we can help you put in touch with people. This is the whole idea of this, to support us as transplantees and people who are waiting for a transplant and then post. It's just really important. Okay. Oh, that is quite nice that I don't know if you saw it, just flashed up. Oh, here we go. I should slow down and check in. Yeah, it's too easy to ignore it, isn't it? It's too easy to ignore it. And then it's also too easy to go, oh, well, that's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I think I'll, go and treat myself to bag of chips, because obviously that's what I need. Sorry, the personal thing there. It's a long time since my transplant, and if and when the second one comes, I must say that those sort of feelings, I think, would be the same for me. Wondering, evaluating if the odd sensational feeling could be an indicator. Yeah, I think if anything doesn't feel completely right, we all have that niggle of worry, what's going to happen? Is that something I really need to look at? Do I need to phone the transplant clinic? Blah, 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 blah. And so being amongst, not just the people who are medics, but being amongst friends and people who've gone through the same thing is really, really important. So let's have a look here. Lovely. Now, as I said, we've got some information. I think it's probably more relevant for the people in the UK. However, right, okay, so this is the sports performance and mental wellbeing support. Oh my goodness, this is free. How often do we get something like this? And how often do we get it free? This is amazing. If you want to do a screenshot at all, or just take down the details of that, look at this, and QR codes as well. You are so up to date. This is great. I'm sure all these ladies would be quite happy to answer any questions, big or small. I am going to be sending you something.
Yeah, I was going to say, to make it easy for everyone in terms of streaming through to the service, it would be myself that would be the main contact first, and then we coordinate who they can be connected to for that service, so that we've got a kind of like one main point of contact that people can kind of keep in their mind, and then for the service, and then I would help connect anyone to one of our 6 strong team we have this year. But of course, if anyone also wants to contact Divya and Urja, feel free. But in terms of the actual service that we have launched all year round, then I would be the main contact. Okay.
That's lovely. Thank you, Elaine.
Thanks, Liz.
That's really clear as well. And yes, I've got my phone here, so I'm actually going to do this. So it's something I can see, and B, it's something on my. Okay, so this is available all the year round. As you can see, there's Elaine here with her team, and yeah, so we've got it's UK based transplant because this team is going to be at the British Transplant Games, which is fantastic. And if you're logging in from another country, perhaps you could share this presentation with your Transplant Games Federation. Say, hey, look, this is a great idea, and is there anybody in our country, and do you know of anyone who can offer such support? If you really can't find anyone, then perhaps contact Elaine, but I know then she'll be inundated with goodness knows how many emails. But okay, so if you're UK based, look what you can have for free. And I think any question, big or small, about your sports, your performance of it, and how to get around what's going in your head when you do your sport, whether it be when you're just being active, or whether you're going to compete at any level. It's really, really important. The confidence side of thing is so important for us to understand and get through. So I would urge anyone to contact. Okay, lovely. I will be contact you. That's lovely. Okay, my goodness me, that's amazing. As far as follow-ups for this webinar, we'll keep posted, because I will have a look at what we can do from there. But I think for the time being, we're going to soak up all the information. The last webinar, which I unfortunately couldn't attend, and this one will be available on the WTGF website, and there's a YouTube link. I urge you all to share it. If you're on social media, your Facebook, your Instagram, perhaps you could share it. Send the link to your team captains or your team managers to say, this would really help. This would really help us all. And guess what? It's free. The men's wellness have some projects coming up, and the women's wellness one, the next one is the 10th of April, and this is about the menopause. And for somebody who fell ill at 17 and had their transplant at 19, and I'm now 55, I felt that the menopause was really a very, very important topic to explore, and especially as a transplantee. So if you have any questions, if you have anything around the menopause you'd like us to discuss and explore, then please write into WTGF. Men, obviously, not the menopause for you. However, there are plenty of topics, and I know that there's been some fantastic coffee chats going on, which I wasn't involved in, but I heard from Damo that they were wonderful in Gerardo. So it's lovely to see these all happening. And as I said before, we are open to any suggestions of topics that need to be explored. Okay, right. I know I've said it, but ladies, thank you very much for your time, your expertise. Fascinating, just fascinating to read and listen to. Thank you very much. Thank you to WTGF. Thank you to my fellow wellness person, Damon. And thank you all for taking the time and taking a good hour out of your day or evening, wherever you are, to come and join in. It is very much appreciated. Spread the word, and hopefully we will see you all next time. But for now, take care of yourselves, and yes, enjoy the rest of your day, evening. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.